think I was thinking if there was a new approach to those young people choosing the art in the first place, and it wasn't all based on a visual experience, it was based on other senses as well. You know, if we sent, they could have little packs of perfume that was evocative of stuff, and we gave them some kind of soundscape that we thought would be, or we gave them this kind of meditative questioning, and then asked them to look at 50 images and then see how they put it. So it was a little bit more immersive and not just based on a visual experience. Because the other thing I was thinking about as well, young people love wearing headphones. They love it. They love to listen to their music as they're creating, and that would be a way of helping them slow down as well and concentrate. So it was all about an experience of curating as well.
I like it. Yeah. So
that sound too hippie, guys? What do you think?
Really good.
And again, just going back to what Hazel was saying about the recovery curriculum, is about restoring, kids to feel safe, calm, engaged. We've all lived through this unprecedented time of uncertainty, and we need to find interesting ways to get them to experience stuff. So yeah, I think rather than just having on screen miniature little pictures and say which pictures do you want to choose, but guiding them through it with texture, smell, hearing, great. And that again helps them to talk about it, because this is the whole point of what we're trying to do, is give them a way into being able to talk about what matters to them, but also the vocabulary of being able to discuss art, really.
And just making, as you say, a recovery experience and a special experience. We could send packs out to the school that was, I don't know, essential oils or whatever, and so it was, that they could.
This is what I've been doing over lockdown, is engaging, families and their kids with art through sending out packs, through doing online how to do videos that then they've gone out and made art out on the beach, but and giving them packs to do stuff. So this is great. Anything else anybody wants to add? I think this is great.
I think that's a really good idea. I think we're progressing very well here. And I think the idea of them listening to music, wearing sounds, wearing headphones, that would be a link in with what they've kind of been enjoying doing while they've been off and away in isolation. I know, yeah. So, and it's a bridge as well between that and also everyone's hearing now more about mindfulness and well-being and nature. It's being aware of your surroundings, and that silence we had back in April and May, where you could hear every bird. I live in Sunderland, and I live about 3 miles from the sea, but in lockdown I could smell the sea. Wow. Because there wasn't air pollution, there wasn't cars, there wasn't airplanes. So I think this kind of sensory thing will link with what they've experienced and noticed from even 7-year-old upwards, the differences.
Lizzie, just thinking about what we've been talking about, and we're trying to work with primary age kids. Have you ever done that, and does it change how you might approach a curated show if you were doing it with specifically to engage discussioning with kids?
I haven't done a huge amount with young kids. Like, most of my sort of public facing aspects has tended to be with adults and older children, but I guess from what I know so far, I'd be inclined to agree that looking at the sort of sensory aspects might be really nice. It's a kind of way into the painting, almost thinking what does this painting sound like to you? I think it's lovely. I think that could be really great.
Great suggestion.
We've had a little learning. We've been doing digital learning resources and just putting a few online that we could, and we did a set called Jump Into a Painting.
Oh.
Very, very simple and the old hat really, but just for young children to say, what are the children talking about? What's this name of the child? Think of a story, all that sort of thing. From a static image, thinking of, the way you would love to, a bit like in Mary Poppins where they jump into the chalk pavement. I love that. Yeah. Jump in there and then think of stories and that sort of thing. So I think that's, again, to do with the senses and going on it, taking yourself on an imaginative journey.
That's really good, because in the painting you could go, what do you think they can hear, you know, in wherever they are, what could they be smelling, you know, what would it smell like in that picture? And what happened just before it, you know, what happened after it, you know, kind of thing. Right.
Or even in an abstract way, how those sounds and those smells make them choose differently. You know, on a different day with different set of sounds, different senses, how would they choose the images that, you know, you could do it in a more literal way for them, but you could also do it in an abstract way to see how those choices were differed.
Lizzie, do you want to give us some thoughts now?
Yeah, I'm not sure what would be most helpful. Maybe if I just talk a bit generally about how I approach things. Obviously, everybody approaches things differently, and I don't mean it to sound prescriptive. It's just to kind of give you an idea of how I work. So I guess in terms of exhibitions, if you think about it, most exhibitions are either relating to a single artist or a closely related group of artists, or are either thematic or quite often a mixture of thematic and some aspect of chronology. Obviously not all of this will be relevant to the work you're doing or for the age groups, but hopefully you'll be able to extract the things that are helpful. So, for example, if you think of an exhibition like the Enchanted Interior that was at the Lane recently, that exhibition was a thematic exhibition. It was really investigating the depiction of gender in artwork, but it also particularly focused on like 19th and 20th century work. So that's just an example of that sort of combination you usually find of thinking about time periods, but thinking about themes as well. And I guess the sort of last couple of decades, a lot of exhibitions have taken a very thematic approach, which is something that, like, one of the most famous examples would be, say, Tate Modern and their permanent hang. They've had quite a few iterations of it where they'll take a very broad theme, such as the human body, and look across the whole breadth of Tate's collection and bring unlikely juxtapositions together. Whereas a kind of purely chronological approach is much rarer. But again, occasionally you'll see that. Like, I used to work at Tate Britain, and the collection there is currently organised by year. So artworks from the same year are put together. And that's another interesting way of looking at it, because they're not necessarily natural combinations, but you get a snapshot of what was happening at a certain time in art history, all in one go. I would have thought for a project like this that thinking about themes across the collection would probably be most relevant. And if you're thinking about current issues like Hazel just mentioned, I'm putting together a grouping for next year at the Hatton, which is all the works by female artists in the collection, because historically we've not really represented those artists particularly well, and also they're a very small part of the collection, so it's quite an interesting kind of conversation starter. And I'm sure there are lots of themes that you could look across the breadth of the collections at the Lane, the Hatton and the Shipley that might be interesting. For example, like something like exile, or something more obviously art-based like still life. And I guess because all of the paintings are on Art UK, that's a fantastic resource because you can see everything at once. And if I was starting on a new collections display, that's probably where I'd start as well, because you can see kind of hundreds of images very quickly, and sometimes things might jump out and things that might go together. I think it's really good to have a really open mind at the beginning. To some extent you can choose a theme and sort of impose that on the artworks, but you can also work the other way around and think, what are the kind of themes that emerge from looking at the collection without having a preconceived idea. What else should I mention? So I guess, yeah, I would recommend kind of starting with the collection, maybe developing an overall kind of theme. And then if you think about an exhibition, if it's really well done, as a visitor, you might not necessarily notice because it's been designed so that you can hopefully have quite a smooth experience through. But we usually kind of then have sub-themes or categories that you go through, just to kind of break up the artworks into particular sections, but also allow you to deal with a theme in more depth or in a different way. So just think of an example. Say you wanted to look at the theme of love across the collections, then maybe you might have a theme looking at parental love or devotional love even. So thinking about your sub-themes, and then I guess that's when a bit of research might come in. And I'm not an expert on like what would be the right thing for primary, but you know, whether you'd then have some kind of interpretation, exhibit labels or text panels, make little films about the themes, and there's lots of different things that we do, as Hazel knows.
Lizzie, I would just like to ask you, you know, say if they've chosen a theme like love or still life or whatever, or Newcastle or the Northeast, then how would you, because I've seen various curators I've worked with, some people make 3D models and put all the miniature versions of the paintings actually round and with the doors and everything. They make it out of polyboard. Some people have huge pieces of paper that they take one to the other, representing a room, and stick out, you know, do it in that very glue and scissors way. And then there's also SketchUp, which I know, could you mention a few of those things or what you use?
Yeah, so when I sort of get to that point where I've got an idea of what I'm doing, the next thing I'll do is make some kind of scale model. So what I like to do is make a big plan of the room on the back of a poster or a big piece of paper to scale. Usually I do like either 25 or 20th of the measurements. And then I'll print out little pictures of the artworks, and I'll just play around with blue tack and just do that for quite a while until it starts to kind of make sense. And I will usually try and talk to somebody else as well quite early on, because you can get too much in your own head and you have to think about visitors as well. So quite often I'll actually ask my husband, because he doesn't know anything about art. So I kind of think, hopefully if it makes sense to him at this stage. But then once I've done that, I'll usually move to like a software, which I think is probably too complicated for most, like it's quite hard for me in terms of children, but SketchUp, it's a software that we use that has a 3D models of the galleries built in. I mean, it could be a resource that it could be useful to use along with them if you had the model set up. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which again Hazel knows about, is Art UK's new free curating tool. If you were interested in making just a digital output rather than thinking so much in terms of specific physical spaces, you can make groupings of the paintings in the collection, and you can add like your interpretation, and it's quite nice. If you wanted to have a look at the website, there's quite a few examples of different online exhibitions.